G'day mate, 40 here. So around 1980, alcoholic Daniel Patrick Moynihan published an op-ed that the Republican Party had become the party of ideas. So how did the Republican Party in 1980 become the party of ideas? By contrast with the MAGA movement, how come Make America Great Again is not known as an intellectual movement? How come MAGA is not known as the political movement of ideas? How come Republicans aren't known as the party of intellectuals? Because Republicans under Donald Trump have gone down market. They are populist, anti-institutional, and there aren't many ways for a pro-MAGA intellectual to feel important in the MAGA movement, and there aren't many ways for him to make money. So Republicans suddenly became the party of ideas under Ronald Reagan because they created opportunities for intellectuals to advance ideas and theories about how the world works. And they created publishing opportunities for intellectuals. And they created think tanks to fund intellectuals. And they created lavish cruises and dinners and social outings where intellectuals could give speeches and make money and feel important. So you want to become the party of ideas? All right, create opportunities for intellectuals to feel important and to feel appreciated and to be funded. I'm just struck by all the news media coverage I'm watching today about Syria and how all the coverage is unanimous that this is vital to America's interests. That if America doesn't intervene in Syria, there will be a great chasm, a gap that other parties, nefarious parties, will fill. And journalists have an interest in promoting the idea that Syria is incredibly important because that increases your incentives to pay attention to what they're offering. And intellectuals and Middle East experts have a self-interest in promoting the vast importance of Syria to American interests because that promotes their interests. That makes them feel important, gives them the opportunity to get on TV, to be published in prestigious journals, to build a career, to increase their financial and professional and sexual opportunities. So what advances the prospects of an individual is not necessarily what's in America's best interests, right? There are a lot of jobs where you'll get ahead by lying and deceiving and by promoting all sorts of nonsense that's against other people's best interests. Okay, for example, chiropractic. Chiropractic's incredibly dangerous, very rarely of any lasting benefit. But if you're a chiropractor, it's a way to make money. Hey, there's a buck in it, bro. So why should you care? I'm an Alexander Technique teacher. And Alexander Technique can help people with speech and projection and movement. But there are often other modalities that are more effective for a particular problem that you might have with physical pain or speech or movement. But if I'm an Alexander Technique teacher, right, I am self-interested in promoting to you the Alexander Technique for whatever ails you. Do you want to truly learn about yourself? Do you want to overcome self-defeating habits and patterns? Are you a lady who wants to, or a bloke who wants to learn to walk in high heels while doing minimum damage to yourself? Then come take some Alexander Technique lessons with me. Now, if you want to minimize the damage that you do to yourself while wearing high heels, then minimize the time you spend wearing high heels, right? But that's not going to make me a buck. So there is a marketing opportunity and a financial opportunity to promote the Alexander Technique or whatever is your particular way of making money to cure some problem. But it's usually not the best cure for a person. And so even though America has no vital national interest in what's going on in Syria, right, people who are talking about what's going on in Syria in the news, right, they have vital personal, professional interests in promoting a false picture of Syria and America. All right, if you want to play the great game of geopolitics, all right, then you are strongly incentivized to promote a highly interventionist American foreign policy. America just going all over God's little green acre, intervening here, intervening there, because that's more exciting. That gives you more opportunities to feel important, gives you more opportunities to make money, gives you more opportunities to increase your status, increase your professional, financial, and sexual opportunities. You get to live an exciting, fulfilling, rewarding, high-status life if you can play the great game of geopolitics, even if this intervention is against America's best interests and against the interests of the countries that you want America to intervene in. So frequently our personal interests and professional interests will go against the interests of other people. And so I wish America would take a page from AA. AA has a principle that we believe in attraction, not promotion. So if the United States wanted to advance democracy, wouldn't it be great if the United States promoted through attraction, not promotion, right? So if you want what we have in the United States, then perhaps you might like to learn from our example in this area or that area, but rather than promoting it through military intervention overseas or funding promotion or think tanks, right? All these people who have personal, financial, professional status interests in promoting a particular type of foreign policy, right? It would do nothing for them if America operated with regard to democracy promotion by abstaining from promotion and only relying upon attraction, right? There are no think tanks that are going to fund attraction, not promotion, with regard to expanding democratic values and human rights around the world. Imagine if you are a human rights campaigner, right? How many think tanks, how many organizations, how many NGOs are going to operate on a basis of attraction, not promotion? Like, how many funding opportunities do you think there are for an NGO that operates on attraction, not promotion? And how many opportunities are you going to have to go on TV and to publish in prestigious journals through a philosophy of attraction, not promotion? So AA developed in the 1930s, and it was profoundly influenced by the example of the Washingtonians. So the Washingtonians were a group that developed after the Civil War and helped alcoholics, but then they expanded their mission. Right? They got March of Dimes syndrome, where they expanded their mission from just one simple mission of helping alcoholics overcome alcoholism to all sorts of social and then political causes, and money and ego and status and prestige and power all corrupted Washingtonians. So what started out as an incredibly successful operation where millions of Americans were on board just self-destructed. And so if you're not an alcoholic, if you're not in AA doesn't want your money. If you are in AA is not going to take more than about approximately $2,000 a year from you. You can't give more than that to AA. So there are all sorts of people who have set up a trust and a will to give millions of dollars to AA or some other 12-step program. That 12-step program will not accept that money because it does not want large financial resources, because it doesn't want battles over power and prestige to intervene with its program of one addict helping another. And so AA does not expand its mission beyond one drunk helping another drunk. It doesn't use celebrity endorsements and mass advertising. It doesn't have spokesmen go before the media to promote its cause. AA relies on attraction rather than promotion. So if foreign policy analysis and America's promotion of democratic values and human rights, instead perhaps operated more along the lines of attraction, not promotion, right? You wouldn't have all these think tanks. You wouldn't have all this self-interest, right? You wouldn't have all these warring egos. You wouldn't have all this money and power competing, because there'd be no money or power to be had. Right? There are no official spokesmen for various 12-step programs because one of its principles is to be anonymous at the level of film and TV and radio. Right? 12-step programs don't want celebrity endorsements. They don't want official spokesmen. There's no one really in charge. It's just democratically led with revolving leaders. And it does not rely on public advertising campaigns. It relies on attraction, not promotion, right? If you want what we have, then you may want to do the things that we do. So imagine if American foreign policy with regard to democracy and human rights promotion just states there may be some things that we're doing that you might benefit from doing. Instead of installing democracy at the point of a sword, instead of overthrowing governments, instead of playing exciting games of geopolitics, right? Instead of playing that great game where you get to flex your ego and you get to flex power and you get to thrust for more and more attention, right? Instead, you just operate on the basis of attraction, not promotion. Greetings from Turkey. Can I say a word in Turkish? I don't know any Turkish, mate. Look, I operate on the basis of attraction, not promotion. If you want what I have, then you can do the things that I've done. I think this principle is an excellent principle, not just for American foreign policy, but for all sorts of schemes and groups and individuals. Right? Instead of telling people what to do, just rely on the principle of attraction, not promotion. So if you give people unsolicited advice, usually they're not going to take to it too positively. But if instead you share, oh, I just tried this and it really helped me in this area, that's not threatening to someone. So you bought a particular type of shirt and you're really happy with this shirt, right? No one's going to be threatened by you sharing that. Or you went to this physical therapist and you got a lot of help for this particular ache and pain. No one's going to be threatened by you sharing that information. But if you tell someone, oh, you need to go to this physical therapist, you need to buy these sheets, you need to buy this shirt, you need to go to this therapist, you need to attend this church, right? That's going to rub people the wrong way, because then you're relying on promotion rather than attraction. So I'm listening to Matthew Continenti's book on Audible, The Right, 100 Years of the Battle to Define Conservatism, which is largely about the leading intellectuals and leading American politicians on the right. And they often set up think tanks in organizations to promote the free market or to promote democracy or human rights. And in the 1950s, there was this widespread notion that conservatism just completely lacked any intellectual foundation in America. But then by the age of Reagan, right, supposedly, according to many intellectuals such as Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the Republicans were the party of ideas. So how did Republicans become such an exciting intellectual party? Well, they created opportunities for intellectuals to feel important, to get published, to give speeches, and to make money. And then suddenly they become the party of ideas. So I notice right now Russell Wilson has the Pittsburgh Steelers on top by about 20 points against the Cleveland Browns. So Russell Wilson was a successful quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks between 2012 and 2021. And then he signed as a free agent with the Denver Broncos, and he had 2 terrible years with the Broncos. Right, so maybe his skills just ran down. Maybe Russ Wilson just didn't have it anymore. But now he's leading the Steelers to a record of something like 9-3. So how did Russell Wilson go from a terrible quarterback while he was with Denver to a great quarterback with Pittsburgh? And it has nothing to do with Russell Wilson's individual skills. In a certain situation, with a certain team, with a certain setup, with a certain circumstance, Russell Wilson excels. In another situation, and with another team, in a different set of circumstances, Russell Wilson is a terrible quarterback. So there's a lot of discussion, can Dak Prescott lead the Dallas Cowboys to a Super Bowl? Well, with a certain team, with a certain coaching, with a certain approach, with a really good running game, if the Cowboys run the ball more than they throw the ball, then Dak Prescott could win the Super Bowl. There's nothing inherent in Dak Prescott or Russell Wilson that prevents them from being a great quarterback. They're just going to be a great quarterback only under a certain situation, only with a certain team, in certain circumstances, with certain coaching, with a certain offensive strategy, with a certain level of supporting characters. So both Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott will usually do better when they have a strong running game, as opposed to a team that relies on throwing the ball first. So the Cowboys are built to get an early lead and then rush the quarterback. And if the Cowboys are playing from behind, that strategy doesn't work out. They are built for a certain style of football. And if they can't get to an early lead, they struggle. But if they can get the opposition behind by 10 or more points, so that the opposition feels like they have to throw the ball on most downs, then the Cowboys usually have a good enough defensive line that they can get to the quarterback and make him turn the ball over, or at least get a sack. Wade Wilson, former Cowboys coach and highly successful defensive coordinator, had a philosophy that a sack is as good as a turnover. Herschel Walker, he was a superstar for the Georgia Bulldogs between 1980 and 1982. But in the national championship game in 1982, Penn State played a particularly gritty style of defense that was masterminded by that football genius Jerry Sandusky. And without Sandusky's brilliant defensive strategy, Penn State would not have won either of its national titles. But Jerry Sandusky came up with a strategy that severely limited Herschel Walker in the Sugar Bowl game around, January 1st of 1983. And without Jerry Sandusky, Joe Paterno would never have won a national title. Jerry Sandusky was a brilliant defensive mastermind. Now, according to the allegations, Jerry Sandusky molested a lot of boys, and that's bad. But he was a defensive mastermind. So in one situation, apparently, Jerry Sandusky's behavior was horrendous. But in other situations, his behavior was brilliant. So if you could just keep Jerry away from the boys and just have him coaching grown men and limit his abilities to sodomize his players, like Jerry Sandusky was a superstar, right? Great defensive genius. Bill Belichick, right? Great defensive coordinator under Bill Parcells. But then he went out on his own, and he was a head coach at Cleveland, and he was only a mediocre 500 coach. And Belichick was another mediocre coach starting out under the New England Patriots. But then Tom Brady came along, right? 6th-round draft choice. And with Tom Brady as quarterback, Bill Belichick won 7 Super Bowls. And if he hadn't lucked into Tom Brady as his quarterback, Bill Belichick would probably never won one single Super Bowl. And yet, Bill Belichick is regarded as the greatest NFL coach ever. But the greatest NFL coach ever depended upon Tom Brady as his quarterback. Right, Tom Landry would never have won a Super Bowl without Roger Staubach as his quarterback. So Tom Landry was descending into senility. All right, he was forgetful. He would call the wrong plays in certain situations. So he would call straight ahead plays at the midfield when he needed a more intricate play, and at the goal line when he just a foot away from scoring, he would call these slow developing plays that were a disaster. Roger Staubach would take the plays that Tom Landry would call. He would call all the plays, but then Roger Staubach would change them. And thanks to Roger Staubach standing up to Tom Landry, refusing to run the plays as Tom Landry demanded, Roger Staubach led the Cowboys to two NFL championships. So by going against what Tom Landry would call, Denny White, who was Roger Staubach's successor, he did not countermand a lot of Tom Landry's plays like Roger Staubach did, and Denny White took Cowboys to 3 straight NFC championships between 1980 and 1982, but he never won any of those games. So Tom Landry only won Super Bowls because he was lucky enough to have Roger Staubach reinterpreting his plays, and that led to Cowboy victories. Herschel Walker, right? Great star for the Georgia Bulldogs in 1980, 81, 82. And then great player for the New Jersey Generals in the USFL. And then he had some great games when he played with the Dallas Cowboys in 1986. He was simply okay in 1987 when he and Tony Dorsett would make for an odd pairing in the backfield. Then in 1988 season, Herschel Walker became the star in Dallas. He was their one superstar. He had a great season. Now the Cowboys sucked. They went something like 3-13. But Herschel Walker had a great year because that particular blocking scheme was a great situation for him to flash his talents. And then Cowboys got a new head coach and a new owner. Jerry Jones was a new owner. And then that bloke from Florida, Jimmy Johnson, became the new coach. And they traded away Herschel Walker to Minnesota. And under the Minnesota scheme, Herschel Walker was mediocre, right? Their particular blocking scheme, their particular offensive scheme did not play to Herschel Walker's skills. So after 2 or 3 disappointing years in Minnesota, Herschel Walker went to the Philadelphia Eagles, where he was okay the first year, then mediocre the second year. So Herschel Walker was a star under a particular set of circumstances. Right? The American political system. There are parts of it that may work great for other countries under certain circumstances. On the other hand, there are going to be circumstances where a xenophobic police state will work much better. And then other circumstances where a socialist top-down economy will work better. Right? Different people respond to different political and economic and legal systems. Right? The same sort of system that will be the best fit for the Japanese is not going to be the best fit for West Africans or North Americans. The type of political, legal, and economic system that is the best fit for indigenous Mexicans is not the best political, economic, and legal system for Northern Europeans. Different people thrive under different political, economic, and legal systems. Different people have different gifts. Different circumstances require different political systems. There is no constitution and no democratic system that is up to the task of every single exigency and situation that will confront a nation state. And so every working democracy has to have the ability to turn into a dictatorship in many areas of life and have many rights suspended, because sometimes that is the only way to navigate through an emergency. So sometimes a team can get a player. The Los Angeles Lakers in the late 90s, they added Shaquille O'Neal as their center. And then paired with Kobe Bryant, right, the Lakers reeled off 3 straight championships. So sometimes an individual can make a team, and sometimes a team can take an individual who's otherwise a mediocre player and make him a superstar. So occasionally you can be with a high-powered, influential person who just transforms the situation around you. But usually the situation around you is going to have more effect on how people behave than any of their innate qualities. Let's go to the chat. It's interesting that when a person gets arrested and gets offered to go into rehab, it's not a 12-step program. They send them to often they do get sent to 12-step programs, and then it's not relying on attraction, right? It's relying on a court order. And people who are ordered by a court to attend AA, they do not have the same level of success usually as people who are attracted to AA and enter into it voluntarily. Right? When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. If you're not ready to go to AA is unlikely to do you much good. But if you're not ready to go to therapy, but you're kind of blackmailed into it by a spouse, right, you're probably not going to get much out of therapy. Right? If all your friends tell you to read a particular book and you don't want to read that book, right, it's unlikely to do you much good. Right? You have to want to read the book to get benefit out of it. So I'm just thinking about, there are a lot of athletes who are stars for a particular team. Then they get traded and it just doesn't work out, right? They're just not a good fit for a different culture, a different offensive or defensive scheme. People can be a star in one workplace and then completely lose motivation in another. I mean, that's my experience. Like, and there's some workplaces I have just kicked ass. I've been great. And then other workplaces, I just feel, my motivation disappearing. And I just go through the motions of doing my job. So, reading Matthew Continetti's book on the right, history of the right in America, Steve Saylor calls the book admirably even-handed. And one of the themes from the book is that Republican politicians don't get punished for an isolationist foreign policy. That's usually no problem with regard to your popularity and election prospects. Also, Republicans win when they run as populists, and they lose when they run as elitists. So William F. Buckley ran for mayor of New York City, and he got most of his support from ethnic Catholics who are usually Democratic voters, right? So same type of people who supported Bill Buckley in his run for mayor of New York City circa 1966, right? The same type of people who voted for George Wallace, who National Review despised and Bill Buckley despised, and the same type of people who voted for Donald Trump. So when conservatives and Republicans run as populists, when they run popular programs, right, when they run on a platform that is anti-elitist and nationalist and populist, they win. When they run as pointy-headed intellectuals and highbrow neoconservative types, they lose. I'll talk to you blokes later. Bye-bye.